Hello and welcome to this transmitter programming tutorial for the E-flite Carbon Z T-28 Trojan 2-meter. Today I'll be programming with this DX6E transmitter, but these programming instructions are applicable for all Spektrum DX-G2 radios. Let's get started by selecting a brand new model. Click the scroll wheel and scroll down to System Setup and click. Scroll over to Yes and click. Now scroll down to Model Select and click. Now we'll scroll down to the bottom of this page and click on Add New Model. Create and click. And now we have a brand new, completely blank model set up on our radio. Let's scroll down to Model Name and we'll give it a name. I'm going to call this one T-28 2.0. Once you've got the name entered, push the back button to go back to the system setup list, and now scroll down to Aircraft Type. Click on Aircraft Type, and then scroll down to where it says Wing Normal. Click on Normal, and scroll to the right until we get to 1 aileron, 1 flap. And then click to lock in 1 aileron, 1 flap. This means we'll have 1 channel controlling our ailerons and 1 channel controlling our flaps. Once you have that locked in, push the back button twice to take us back to the home screen. Now click the scroll wheel again, and let's scroll down to DR and Expo to set up our dual rates and exponential. Click. We'll start with the aileron channel, since that's what's already selected. Let's scroll down and select a switch for our dual rates. Click where it says On, and scroll to the right to select a switch. I'll be using the C switch for my dual rates. Starting with the C switch in the 0 position, the high rate position, we'll leave the dual rates at 100%. However, we need to add an expo of 10%. So we'll scroll to the zeros next to expo and click, and scroll to the right until we get to 10%. Then we'll click to lock them in. Now we'll flip the C switch down to the 1 position, our low rate position, and we'll adjust the dual rates. Click and scroll left down to 70%. Click to lock it in, and then we'll scroll down to the expo, click, and we'll move that up to 5%. Now we can test to see that that's working. Flip back up to the 0 position for high rates. We have 100% with 10% expo, and we'll flip down to the 1 position for low rates. There we've got our 70% rates with 5% expo. Now let's do the same for the elevator and rudder channels. Scroll up to where it says aileron, click, scroll right, select elevator channel. Now scroll down to select the switch. Click to lock in your switch. Start with your higher rates, leave it 100, add a 10% expo. Flip the switch down to the low rate position and drop your rates down to 70%. And then add a 5% expo. Verify it's working. And now let's do the exact same thing for the rudder channel. Now we have our dual rates set up. Push the back button, and now let's go down to throttle cut. click on throttle cut, and now scroll down to where it says inhibit and click. Scroll to the right to select a throttle cut switch. The H switch is most commonly used for throttle cut, and that's the switch I'll be using. We can see that just by selecting the H switch, it automatically sets the throttle position to -100 when that switch is flipped. That's exactly what we want. When our throttle cut is on, our throttle channel is locked in at -100%. Even if we bump the throttle stick, it will stay at -100. This is very important when out at the flying field to help reduce the chance of an accidental throttle up. Now we'll push the back button, and now we'll go down to flap system. Click on flap system. Now scroll down to inhibit and click on inhibit. Scroll to the right to select a switch. I'll be using the D switch, which is commonly used as a flap switch. And per the manual, we'll set the first flap position, that 0 there, to -100%. So click on the 0 and scroll left to -100%. And then click to lock it in. And we'll leave the elevator mix at 0%. Now scrolling down to position 1, we'll leave the flap value at 0%, but add a 10% elevator mix. Click on the 0 under the elevator column, and scroll to the right until we get to 10%, and then click to lock it in. Now we'll scroll down to the flap value of position 2, click, and scroll to the right to bring it all the way up to 100%. And click to lock it in. And then we'll go to the elevator column and we'll add an 18% elevator mix. Now we can see our flaps are working as they should. However, they're moving too quickly. Let's adjust the flap speed. Go down to where it says norm and click, and scroll to the right until we get to 2 seconds, 2.0 seconds. And click to lock it in. Now we can see they move at a more scale, slower speed. Now that we have our flaps set, push the back button and scroll up to servo setup. Click on servo setup and scroll down to the word travel and click on the word travel. Now scroll to the right until it says reverse. Click on reverse. And now we need to go down to the gear channel, GER. Scroll down to GER and then click. This will reverse the gear channel on our A switch so that our landing gear move in the appropriate direction. Now we can push the back button twice back to our home screen, and now our DX6E is programmed and ready to fly the E-flite Carbon Z T-28 Trojan 2-meter. Thank you for joining me in this tutorial. Hello and welcome to this transmitter programming tutorial for the E-flite Carbon Z T-28 Trojan 2-meter. Today I'll be programming this NX6 transmitter. However, this programming is applicable for all Spektrum NX radios. Let's get started by selecting a brand new model. We'll click the scroll wheel and scroll down to System Setup. Click on System Setup and then click on Yes. Now we'll scroll down to Model Select and click, and then scroll down to Add New Model and click. Scroll down to Create and click. And there we have a brand new, completely blank model right on our transmitter. Let's give the model a name. Scroll down to Model Name and click. Scroll down and click. And starting with the first character, I'm going to name this one T-28 2.0. Once you have your model named, push the back button twice to take you back to the system setup screen, and now scroll down to Aircraft Type and click. scroll down to where it says wing normal and click, and scroll to the right until we get to one aileron, one flap, and click to lock it in. One aileron, one flap means we'll have one channel controlling our ailerons and one channel controlling our flaps. Push the back button twice to take us back to the home screen, and now click the scroll wheel. Scroll down to servo setup, click on servo setup, and now scroll down to where it says travel and click on travel, and scroll to the right until we get to reverse and click on reverse. We need to reverse the gear channel, so scroll down to where it says GER and click to reverse it. Now our landing gear on the A switch will move up and down in the correct direction. Now we can push the back button, back to the function list, and now let's go down to DR and Expo to set up our dual rate and exponential. Starting with the aileron channel, since that's what's already selected, let's scroll down and select a switch. Scroll down to where it says switch on and click, and scroll to the right to choose a switch. I'll be using the C switch. The C switch in the 0 position will be my high rates. So I'll leave that rate at 100%, but I need to add an expo of 10%. So click on the zeros next to expo and scroll to the right until you get to 10%, and then click to lock it in. Now I'll flip the C switch down to the 1 position for my low rate position, and I'll change the rates from 100 down to 70. I'll click on the 100s and scroll left to bring it down to 70. Now, I need to add an expo of 5%. So I'll click on the zeros and scroll to the right until I get to 5% and click to lock it in. Now I'll verify the switch is working. 0 is my high rates and 1 is my low rates. Now let's do our elevator channel. Scroll up to where it says aileron, click, and scroll to the right for the elevator channel. Scroll down to switch on to select a switch. Scroll right and click to lock it in. Again, 0 position being our high rates, we'll leave those at 100%, but we need to add an expo of 10%. Click and scroll to the right. 10%, click to lock it in. Now we'll flip the C switch down to the 1 position for our low rates, and now we'll adjust those 100s down to 70. Click to lock it in, and add a 5% expo. Verify it's working, high and low. Very good. And now let's do the exact same thing for the rudder channel. Scroll up to elevator, click, and scroll right until we get to rudder. I will select the switch, C switch, expo of 10%, flip to low rates, bring the rate down to 70% with a 5% expo. Now we have our dual rates and exponential set up. Push the back button and now scroll down to throttle cut. Click on throttle cut, then scroll down to where it says inhibit and click. Scroll to the right to select a throttle cut switch. The H switch is most commonly used for throttle cut, and that's the switch I'll be using. We can see that when we flip the throttle cut on, it's automatically locked in at negative 100%. This is very important when out at the flying field to help reduce the chance of an accidental throttle up. Now we can push the back button again, and now let's go down to flap system to set up our flaps. Scroll down to inhibit and click, and scroll to the right to select your flap switch. The D switch is most commonly used for flaps, and that's the switch I'll be using. As we can see from the manual, the 0 position flap value should be negative 100%. So we'll click on that value and scroll left until we get to negative 100. And then click to lock it in. and the elevator mix will remain at 0 for position 0. For position 1, the flap value will remain at 0, but we need to add an elevator mix of 10%. So click and scroll right to 10%. Now scroll down to the flap value for position 2. We'll click and bring that up to 100%. Scroll right until you get to 100% and click to lock it in. And finally, we'll add an elevator mix to that of 18%. Click and scroll right to 18%. Now we can see the flaps move as they should. However, they move too quickly. Scroll down to where it says speed norm and click, and scroll to the right until we get to 2 seconds, 2.0 seconds. And click to lock it in. Now we can see our flaps will come down much more scale and slow. Now we can push the back button twice back to the home screen. This NX6 is now programmed and ready to fly the Carbon Z T-28 Trojan 2-meter. Thank you so much for joining me in this tutorial. Hello and welcome to this transmitter programming tutorial for the E-flite Carbon Z T-28 Trojan 2-meter. Today I'll be programming this IX14 transmitter, but these programming instructions are applicable for all Spektrum IX radios. Let's get started by selecting a brand new model. Click the orange marker at the top left-hand side of the screen, then click Proceed. And now click the 3 dots at the top right-hand side of the screen and click Add New Model. Default, Airplane, Create. Now let's scroll down to the bottom of the page and we can select the model we just created, Acro, click, and then click where it says Acro again and we can name the model. We'll delete what's in there and I'll name this one T-28 2.0. Once you've got it named, hit Done, and now push the back button twice. Now we're back at the home screen. Let's get started by setting up our dual rates and exponential. Click Model Adjust, and then click Dual Rates and Expo. We'll start with the aileron channel, since that's what's already selected. Click where it says Switch On to select a switch. I'll be using the C switch. With the C switch in the 0 position, that will be our high rate. So we will leave the dual rates at 100%. However, we need to add an expo of 10%. So click on the zeros next to expo, and now bring them up to 10%, and then hit OK. Now we have our high rate set in the 0 position. Flip it down to the 1 position for our low rates. Now we'll click the 100s next to dual rates and bring them down to 70. And click OK to lock them in. And now click on the zeros next to expo and bring them up to 5%. And hit OK to lock them in. Now we have our high and low rates working on the C switch for the aileron channel. Now let's do the same for our elevator and rudder channels. Scroll back up to where it says Channel Aileron and click, and select Elevator. Now select the switch, click on where it says On, and select your switch, the C switch. Now with the C switch in the 0 position, we'll leave the dual rates at 100%, but we need an expo of 10%. Click on Expo, add 10%, and then hit OK to lock it in. Now we'll flip down to the 1 position for our low rates. We'll click on the 100% and bring those down to 70. Click OK to lock it in, and then add an expo of 5%. You can test to see those are working. And they are. And now finally we'll do the same for the rudder channel. Click on Elevator, select Rudder, select On, and select Switch C. Leave the dual rates at 100% in the 0 position and add 10% expo. Now we'll flip down to the 1 position for low rates, and we'll bring the rates down to 70. OK to lock them in, and then click on Expo and add 5%. OK to lock it in. And we can see those are working as they should. Now that our dual rates are set, push the back button, and now click on Servo Setup. Now we'll click on the switch next to the gear channel in order to reverse the gear. Now our landing gear on switch A will move in the appropriate direction. We'll push the back button again. And now click on Throttle Cut. Click on where it says Inhibit and select a switch to act as your throttle cut switch. The H switch is most commonly used for throttle cut, and that's the switch I'll be using. We can see that just by selecting the H switch, it puts the position of the throttle cut switch at negative 100%. That's exactly what we want. When we flip our throttle cut on, it locks our throttle channel in at negative 100%. This is very important when out at the flying field to help reduce the chance of an accidental throttle up. And now push the back button twice to return us to the home screen. And now click on Model Setup. Aircraft Type. Proceed. Now click Wing and select 1 aileron, 1 flap. 1 aileron, 1 flap means we'll have 1 channel controlling our ailerons and 1 channel controlling our flaps. And this will open up the Flap System menu. Push the back button twice, and we'll go back into Model Adjust. Now we can see Flap System. Click on Flap System. Now we'll click on Inhibit to select a flap switch. The D switch is most commonly used as a flap switch, and that's the switch I'll be using. According to the manual, position 0's flap value should be set to negative 100%. So click that 0 and bring it all the way down to negative 100, leaving the elevator mix at 0, and click OK. Now for position 1, we'll leave that flap value at 0, but add an elevator mix of 10%. Click the 0 and move the elevator mix up to 10%, and then hit OK. Now for position 2, we need 100% on the flap value and 18% on the elevator mix. We can set that now. Bring the flap value to 100% and bump the elevator mix up to 18. And OK to lock it in. Our flaps are now set and move as they should. However, they move too fast. Click where it says Speed 000 and let's bump that up to 2 seconds, 2.0 seconds. And OK to lock it in. Now our flaps move at a more scale, slow pace. Now we'll push our back button twice. It takes us back to our home screen. Now this IX-14 is ready to fly the E-flite Carbon Z T-28 2 meter. Thank you so much for joining me in this tutorial.